We've called the session the Record Roundup, but first of all, just to introduce Record to anyone who isn't aware of us. I do recognise a lot of names and faces, but in case anybody's new to this and doesn't know who we are. So Record is the local environmental record centre for Cheshire, Houghton, Warrington and Wirral. So you can see us on the map. I don't know if you can see me moving my mouse, but you might be able to see us on the map just below where it says Manchester. So there are local environmental record centres all over the country. That's what the map's showing you, is where different record centres cover. And our role as a local environmental record centre is we're not-for-profit organisations that collect, collate and manage information on the natural environment for our defined geographic areas. So a lot of the information that we have does come from people like yourselves. Could be talking to specific people here. I know a lot of people do a lot of recording for us, which is absolutely brilliant. But for anyone who's not done it before, one of the kind of reasons we do these sessions is to encourage people to get out and do their own wildlife recording. Anything is important, even if it's just common things, common birds you see in your back garden. And hopefully we'll be able to provide today a little bit of kind of a roundup of what we do as a record centre, how you can kind of get involved with the various bits that we've got going on. So the way we've structured it is we are going to each give our kind of highlights of the year. We do a lot of different stuff and we certainly couldn't fit it all into a sort of half-hour, 40-minute talk, and everyone would probably get really bored if we went through every single thing we've done this year, but just going to give our kind of main highlights and a little bit of sort of background about what's going on. So I'm up first. So for people again who don't know me, my actual role is the Data Services Officer at Record. So I do a bit of data stuff, but I also get involved with organising and attending lots of events, lots of kind of places that we go to engage with the general public about wildlife recording. So a real highlight for me this past year has been, in comparison to the first year I was at Record, so I only joined at the beginning of 2020. I kind of had 2 months of sort of normalish, and then obviously everyone knows what happened after that. We had the lockdowns and we couldn't do a lot of going out to events. They just weren't happening, or it wasn't sort of safe to do so. But really luckily this year we have been able to go to a lot more places, which has been really fun for us. You can see a few examples of what we've been getting up to here. We've got ELINA looking really COVID safe at the Chester University volunteer fair a few weeks ago, so engaging with potential new student volunteers. We've got National Moth Week, that was, which I did at the zoo, which was one of my favourites because I really like moths, but a lot of the general public, although a lot of biological recording people really like moths too, but generally they're not quite so kind of well respected. I don't know if that's the right word, but people don't always like them as much. So it's always really good to kind of spread the word about how amazing they actually are. We also went to Rowton Hall a couple of weeks ago. You can see Steve, one of our volunteers, there along with me and ELINA too. That was an event organised by Eco Communities. So it's not just us attending these events. And what's also been really nice this year is that we've been able to sort of meet with other organisations and other sort of individuals locally as well who've been going to the events too. And we've also worked a lot with Chester Zoo on various kind of community outreach events. So on the bottom left, that was what I think it was in Blacon back in the summer. So we've been working with their community engagement team on doing kind of various events in the sort of areas that they work in. And then one big event for us this year was the Chester Zoo Wildlife Connections Festival, which is that middle picture there. I've got the lovely blue tip crown on. So we did a lot of kind of general engagement there, kind of raising the awareness of who we are as Record, and we spent a lot of our time helping people look for slugs and crane flies, mostly in the nature reserve. So not that much variety with the bug hunting because of the sort of weather, but it was a really fun event anyway, and really good to be able to get out and engage with people again. Everyone always laughs at me because I am quite obsessive about clicking everybody that we talk to on my little clicker. So we've counted this year 1,231 sort of engagements, so interactions with people, which is not as good as probably a normal year, but it's much better than last year. So yeah, really pleased to have that to kind of show how we've been doing and how many people we've been meeting with. So I'm sure you're thinking that all sounds super fun for me anyway, but you may be wondering what this has got to do with our kind of main purpose as a local environmental record centre. So I just put some of our kind of aims of our engagement work up there, just to give you a bit of background about why we attend these events, why it's important to be doing this stuff in terms of our kind of general mission as a record centre. So we want to be connecting people with the wildlife of our particular area, so encouraging people to get out and explore the wildlife right on their doorsteps. So that can be anything from kind of like a child counting how many legs the woodlouse has got, up to people learning kind of more advanced kind of identification skills. So it's really, really important that people are doing that. It may be kind of hard to make the link between just looking at a bug if you're like a 5-year-old and kind of making an actual biological record. But certainly from my point of view, having that kind of initial connection with the wildlife, kind of emotional connection to it, that's really important in terms of people's motivation to want to go on and try and protect it. So that's the reason that we do it. That kind of leads on to the next point, which is raising awareness of record and of biological recordings. So we are quite a small organisation, and a lot of people aren't aware that we exist or don't know what we do. So we really want to kind of make ourselves a little bit well known within our area. And sometimes the people that we talk to, they might even be doing biological recording but not even know it. They might be kind of photographing fungi out in the woods, or they might be writing down the birds they see out their window and not be aware that they can just send that in to us to make a difference to conservation. So it's raising that awareness of how they can do that and how easy it is. The kind of most important thing is obviously to enable and motivate people to help local wildlife through recording. So that's anything from people learning a little bit of knowledge about how to identify stuff so they can record it, up to sort of learning how to input the records into our Swift system. So obviously that's the kind of main aim for us, is that people are getting out there and helping wildlife through recording, and also that people know why it's important to record wildlife as well. Sometimes it can be a bit hard for people to make the link between recording something and helping to protect species or habitats, but it is a link that's definitely there, and that's one of the aims of our engagement work as well, is to kind of make sure people are aware of that anyone can help wildlife through recording. So I think I'm probably running a bit short on time, so trying to stick to 7 minutes. So I'll push through this quickly, but I did want to mention that it's not just the 4 of us who you're going to hear speaking today. We do have a massive team of volunteers, so that counts anybody who goes out and records wildlife for us, which I know a lot of you guys do. So thank you very much for submitting your records to us. We also have over 90 kind of formally registered volunteers now in our kind of more formal volunteering roles. So we've got our data processor volunteers who enter thousands, if not millions even, of records into our Swift database. That's a super important role. We've got our wildlife engagement volunteers who are out and about with us at the events I've just mentioned. We've got recording volunteers who are helping with surveys, which ELINA and Chloe are going to mention more about that in a minute. We've got communications volunteers who do sort of social media, and also this year have been helping with our new website as well, which is hopefully on the cards for 2022, fingers crossed. And yeah, we have had GIS stuff in the past as well. So all sorts of stuff going on. If you're listening and you're not a volunteer already and you do want to get involved with that, then you are very, very welcome to just get in touch with us via email or sort of search for us on the internet. Yeah, again, just thanks very much to all of our volunteers for all of your hard work. I'm going to pass over to ELINA now.
So thank you very much, Iona, and good evening to everybody. For those who don't know me, I'm ELINA, and I've been the database officer for Record for over 2.5 years now. And I'm just going to give you a quick overview of what I've been up to this year, and then I'll share my favorite part of the year with you. So at the top, you can see I've been doing some GIS work on different projects, including the ancient woodland inventory, and also digitizing local wildlife sites for the Cheshire Wildlife Trust with the help of our volunteers that Iona just mentioned a minute ago. I've also been working on our Forgotten Spaces project, which are our underrecorded areas. And we're hoping to have an interactive map of this soon on our website, so stay tuned for that. Then, yeah, the day-to-day volunteer support in terms of any data queries. I've also done some wildflower ID training with Identiplant, and I've been out with the CMIC group. And I've just received my certificate for this, so I'm very pleased with that. And as Iona mentioned, we have been to a few outreach events, so that has been really nice to be out and about again. I've also been involved in many different surveys for the zoo or other conservation groups. And yeah, the last thing on the list is I've taken up sign language again. So you might ask what this has to do with the record. So we do work with a lot of different community groups, and personally, I like supporting community work and building stronger communities, especially in terms of creating equal opportunities and minimizing barriers. So I learned sign language when I was working at the zoo for 2 years, and I just picked it up again at the end of October, joining Deaf Club in Chester to refresh my memory a bit and learn a few more signs and meet deaf people that want to learn certain skills to become more employable, are interested in wildlife and conservation, or just like being out and about in nature. So I'm looking forward to more work in this area. And if anybody's interested in this, I'm happy for you to email me about it. They're running a taster session or course next year. So yeah, do let me know. And yeah, if you don't want to sign up to a course or anything, then you can join the Deaf Club as well on a Thursday or a Saturday like me. Right, so next I'm gonna reveal my favorite part of the year, which has been the Marine Wildlife Recording Days. So before I started at Record in May 2019, when I was working at Chester Zoo, I was picked to go to one of the yearly expeditions, which was the first UK one, and we went to Wales. So I only went the first week as I'd already started at Record. And at that time, I didn't have a particular interest. Well, I still find everything interesting. So yeah, after the expedition, I was just curious to see how many marine wildlife records we had. And I was shocked that apart from birds, we didn't have many at all. And I've always been more interested in the underrecorded species groups. So at that point, I wanted to team up with the Cheshire Wildlife Trust, and they were planning on applying for funding for the Decoastliner project. But then COVID hit, so funding application was cancelled. We couldn't go out, but as soon as we could, and it was safe to do so, I organised the first day at the end of June in Thurston. After that, we went to different beaches along the Wirral Coast every month. So Leaso in July, New Brighton in August, Wallasey in September, and Hilbury Island in October. They were quite popular, and they were really good as well. And we just did some general recording as opposed to any scientific surveys. So it was more practical for us, as the aim was to get as many records as possible and to cover as many 100-meter squares as we could. We mostly have sandy beaches, but also a few rocky bits here and there. So we found a lot of different species on the different beaches. And a very exciting find was the honeycomb worm, as this is a very important indicator species. So in the future, we're hoping to be mapping the reefs, hopefully next year, the year after. And yeah, Natural England said they might be able to help us with some funding. So fingers crossed for that. And yeah, here on the map, you can just see some of the different finds that we found along the coast. And then, yeah, the volunteers looking very interested in one of the rock pools. And then, yeah, I just wanted to share some interesting finds and stats with you. So, yeah, we went to 5 different beaches, as I just said. We surveyed 2,800-meter squares. We collected 590 records, plus 38 of the settled areas, so the honeycomb worm reefs. And just thought it was really interesting that we found 4 different species of jellyfish, which were the beryl, the moon, the compass, and the lion's mane jellyfish. And then here is just a quick breakdown of the different species, the most recorded species. So common cockle, green shore crab, common mussel, barnacles, and common periwinkle. In terms of the barnacles, yeah, we couldn't really ID them to species, even though I've been trying and I've been reading up about them. When you go into the field, they're just a nightmare. So I know what to look out for, but they just don't look like in the textbooks. So that's something I want to get into next year. And just a few other finds here. So this is my favorite razor clam or razor shell, the bean. razor shell because it's quite easy to identify because the hinge is in the middle rather than at the end. Then the common mussel here, we found this really weird looking species, which we thought was maybe a zebra mussel, but they do look quite different and they occur more in fresh water. So we found out that this is actually an earlier stage of the common mussel. So learned something new. Then we found this weird looking worm, which we still haven't identified. It was along the Sabellaria reefs. And yeah, there were quite a few in the end. So still trying to find out what that is. If anybody knows, let me know. Then we found an elegant anemone, which I've never seen in my life before, really interesting. And then Eric was really chuffed with this find here, which is a Pacific oyster. It's not great that it's in the area because apparently it's invasive, but it's good that we've recorded this because then we know that it's there. We can pass that information on. Right, looking forward. So I've got more marine wildlife recording days planned next year. Don't know when I'm going to start them yet. Just got to wait for the weather to be a bit better and safer to go out. Yeah, we're going to be going to different locations. So I'm thinking about Red Rocks, and somebody suggested Eastern Coast. If anybody has any other suggestions, let me know. And then we're also going to be collaborating with some other organizations. So with the University of Chester, there's a keen lecturer. They've got two marine wildlife conservation programs running at the moment. I've been in touch and volunteering myself with the North Wales Wildlife Trust, some local groups, and we're hoping to be getting involved with the Cheshire Wildlife Trust as well. And last but not least, this is just an idea because at the end of the expedition, we kind of wrapped the whole week up with an outreach event on World Ocean Day, the 8th of June. So hopefully we'll be able to do something similar, but yeah, we'll see. Lots of exciting stuff going on. Right, I'm gonna pass over to Chloe now, who's gonna tell you about her favorite part of the year.
I've moved on to the next slide, but it doesn't matter. Okay, anyway, hello, my name is Chloe. I know that I know a lot of you, but if you don't, oh, thank you, Iona. I'm the monitoring officer at Records, and I've been there just under 2 years now. So I've been helping with the surveys on the nature reserve at Chester Zoo for 2 survey seasons. And we work in partnership with Chester Zoo, the Conservation and Science Department, in order to monitor the nature reserve. And one of the really exciting things about this year, and this is why I've got this 2021 with the big arrow next to it, is that this is actually the 5th year of doing a monitoring program. So what that means is doing different surveys in the same way, exactly the same method, and each year repeating them in the same way. So now it's really beginning to look like a good body of data that we're collecting about the reserve there, and it helps us to see what is happening as the survey, as the reserve, as Andy was saying earlier, was created from an agricultural field. It really helps us to see how the biodiversity is building up and how it's changing over the years, and also to inform the management there to see if how the reserve is being managed is actually suiting the species there. And as you can see in the picture, this is a view of the reserve itself, and this is taken in the middle of the summer. And it's really looking very, very different to just an ordinary kind of bright green agricultural field, which is what it was before. This is the main meadow view that we're looking at the moment. So you can see that it's really kind of growing up nicely with a lot of flowers now. So moving on, hopefully. Okay, this is working now. So the surveys that I'm involved in are some of the invertebrate surveys, and also helping with organise and do the bird and the plant surveys as well. And this year has been really different to last year. It's been really interesting to see, and that was partly a feature of the weather really. And this view on the left, taken in April, this was a really typical scene where I was, you know, invertebrates are really fussy. You know, butterflies don't really do kind of strong wind and you know, rain and things like that. And I'd often be standing there thinking, oh no, am I going to get this survey in before it starts pouring with rain? And there were a number of times when I was rained off, and that was very different to last year, which was very, very dry. And so it was interesting really to see how that was impacting on the species that I was surveying. And I've put just a few here. There's the dragonfly, the broad-bodied chaser there, which was, I saw ovipositing or laying eggs in a number of the water bodies across the site. And also I resisted the temptation to put one of the more unusual birds that we saw and put a blue tit in, because this was one of the most common species and was actually nesting in nest boxes all around the site. As well as the surveys that are carried on every month or regularly every year, there was also a new survey this year. And in the picture here, you can see Iona. She was actually organising and running these surveys, and they were moth surveys. So it's really nice to get some data about what moths are on the nature reserve. And I think they found over 250 species over the course of the season. And it wasn't just Iona sitting there on her own. She did have a team of volunteers with her, which was great. So one of the things that was really nice, actually, especially after last year, we did have some volunteers helping us with the surveys last year, but it was really nice that we could involve volunteers a little bit more this year. And it was great to work again with Hilary Ash, who's our plant expert, who you can see very kindly came down and helped us with the meadow survey. And this is one of our volunteers, Nathan. We had a team of 6 of us going out for a couple of days, and we were using these quadrats and counting the occurrences of plants in the different sections of the quadrats, and also things like the height of the vegetation, just to help us find out about the health of the meadow and if it's moving in the right direction. Also volunteers helping us with the bird surveys, and I did put on one of the more unusual finds here. Joe O'Hanlon, one of our volunteer surveyors there, managed to get a really great shot. This is his shot of a short-eared owl, which I got to say doesn't really turn up every day, to be honest, on the reserve. This was the first time it had been recorded there, but that was a really lovely sighting that we had. And also to be able to run an ID course, so an identification course about grasses. And here you can see Hilary Ash, our plant expert, who we got back to help our team of volunteers who are helping with a wider site survey of the plants, to learn a bit about grasses, as these are often one of the sticking points, one of the harder things really to learn. Okay, so there was a little bit of extra insect recording on the reserve this year as well. Well, when I say a little bit, there was a lot actually, and it was a real pleasure to have links with Phil Brighton, who is the county cranefly and Diptera recorder. And he did a massive survey about flies across the whole of the season. And we've got an absolutely amazing set of data, including a lot of species which are new to the county from that. And also to be able to invite Diptera. So some of you might know about Northwest Invertebrates, which is based over in Liverpool Museum. They cover Lancashire and Cheshire and the areas around there. And they came and brought with them a lot of experienced entomologists who we had on some of the reserve and also some of the adjacent land, and really getting some nice records for things that we haven't necessarily recorded before on specialist groups, which you need very specialist skills to record. Now I've put in a slide here about data because actually this is part of the process that I personally quite enjoy really. And it's a matter, it is quite a big task getting the raw data, so the data sheets from out in the field, into the database, onto Swift, with the help of volunteers, of course, and then being able to turn it into a kind of meaningful form so that we can actually get some kind of meaningful results out of it. And in this case, this is one of the bird territory maps which we've been able to produce from the data in order to be able to compare with previous years how many birds we think of that particular species are nesting within the confines of the nature reserve. So just to end really, one of the personal favourites for me this year has been a bit of extra work that I've been doing, helping with the monitoring, but really baseline monitoring on a piece of land that the zoo bought fairly recently, which is just next door to the nature reserve. It's got quite a different history and has been managed in a different way with grazing. As a result, it is quite a different bit of land, and it's been a pleasure to have 3 months where I was going every month to look at particularly bees, hoverflies and wasps on there, and really to get some sort of basic information as a starting point of what is actually present on the land, to help them decide really about what they want to survey in the future on the land there, and so that, you know, there's some comparative data to look back on. And it was great really having a route around in the different parts of that piece of land, and to, you know, have the privilege to get those records the first time and see what animals were actually making use of the site there. And on the left here in this picture, you can see that there's this sort of bit of scrub in this mound with a little bit of bare soil here, sandy soil, and it looks like such a small area, but from the point of view of the species I was talking about, particularly bees and wasps, this is real, you know, this is like striking gold really for a lot of the species, not all of them, but for a lot of them, they can really make use of bits of ground like this for nesting in, and it's very valuable habitat. So it was great really to identify bits of valuable habitat on the land, and exciting to find what was there. Particularly exciting, and I've put this picture on the right here. This is a red-girdled mining bee, and it was very, very nice to find this nesting on that piece of land, partly because it is a nationally scarce species, but as well as that, because this was actually the first records for Cheshire of this particular species. So that's really the, you know, highlights of my year, and I'm going to pass over now to Eric.
Thanks, Chloe. Right, yeah, well, for those of you who don't know me, I'm Eric Fletcher. I'm the manager of Record. I have been there at Record now for 15 years. I took over as manager in 2007 from Steve Williams, for those of you who know Steve. Yeah, we've gone on from there. So I'm really going to talk about what I've been doing the last year or so. And really, I guess for me anyway, it seems to fall into one sort of category, and that's pretty much all things IT. We've recently restructured, so we've had essentially a change in staffing, and we've moved away from an IT, having an IT officer based with us for a number of reasons, to having a database officer based with us instead, which means that there is some shortfall in the IT side of things, and I've been filling that gap, as it were. So as Iona alluded to earlier on, we've had to work remotely, which has been quite interesting really. We've been fortunate in some respects that we've been able to, from the start, work remotely, and it's not been a huge issue for us, although I'm sure some of my colleagues will be sitting there thinking a huge issue. They will know trying to remotely access our servers become a problem, and becoming more of a problem, which is essentially pushed us into adopting Microsoft 365. So as part of our working remotely, we've hit some snags with our server, and we've decided that actually the best way forward now is to work remotely using the cloud. Fortunately, Microsoft 365, Microsoft themselves have what they call a donation, a charitable giving arm essentially, and a donations account. We were able to, because we're a not-for-profit organisation and a registered charity, we were able to access Microsoft 365 and a number of, I think it's 10 accounts, business accounts, premium accounts, if you will, in Microsoft 365 for free, because we're a charity as part of their donation. We've linked up with a also linked up with an IT consultant that will help us migrate our systems to the cloud, which will give us a lot more security. What we've had over the last year or so is failing IT hardware, but also software is becoming outdated. So there was a need really within our system, within our infrastructure to sort of upgrade, and the cost to upgrade a server in the current day even to get something similar to what we had already, you know, you're talking a number of thousands of pounds, and it's because we don't have the on-site skill set to be able to deal with that. It seemed like a logical move to go to the cloud and actually utilize that. So our IT consultant is helping us migrate some of our systems up onto the cloud, and it will help us basically with our collaborative working, so both internally and externally. It'll also provide us a lot more security and longevity. So we're currently still in the process of dealing with that, but that's working really well at the moment. So I'm quite pleased at how things are progressing on that front. Okay. There we go. And of course, not that we like to do things by halves, we've also had to migrate from our old online data input system. If any of you are familiar with that, I'm sure most of you are. In fact, I know there's a number of people in the audience who are definitely familiar with Rodis, perhaps too familiar, I think they would say. But we had to migrate from Rodis because, again, it was based on some legacy software, which has now become outdated. In fact, it was forcibly taken offline at the end of 2020 by Google. They no longer supported it within their browser. So essentially we had a very hard deadline that we had to move and migrate from Rodis to Swift for that period. And in fact, we did. We were very pleased with the way things had gone. It's been developing since then. Interestingly, just as a matter of note, in the first year, well, almost 2 years now, not almost a year now, that Swift has been up and available online for people to enter data, we've gathered 1.5 million records into Swift, which is actually incredible for what, if we compare it to Rodis. And the great thing about Swift is, amongst a number of things, obviously it's far more stable. There's less bugs in Swift, but there's a key factor that our volunteers can import data in greater numbers. So the reason we've got 1.5 million records imported or entered into the Swift this year is through things like data sharing with the Moth group and people like that, and other large groups, Butterfly group are examples. And that obviously that information, those records can come into the system really, really quickly. Swift is able to manage that, assimilate that information into the system and ensure that it matches our database settings and our validation rules. And that can then go straight into our main database. So it's a really, really big development for us. Add to that the fact that you can add things like images in there, and there's allows greater validation of the data. It's just a brilliant step forward for us, and it's much easier to manage. One of the issues again we had was that Rodis was a great tool but had no organic growth, and unfortunately, as we've no longer got our IT officer, and particularly the IT officer that developed it, who was had particular intimate knowledge of the system, we've not been able to upgrade it. So Swift was a godsend really, and we're fortunate to work with our counterparts in Greater Manchester who developed Swift and are continuing to develop it with us. So it's been brilliant. Of course, I've also been doing, as part of this, lots of data analysis. we're obviously, as I say, we're talking 1.5 million records have gone into Swift already. We're also trying to migrate data from old Rodus accounts into Swift so that users can maintain the same data set, so that they can use that and search through that. So there's a lot of work going on in there. We're having to use more and more, having to use things like MySQL and Microsoft SQL Server just to basically handle the quantities of data that we're dealing with. As I say, 1.5 million records in Swift already is a huge number, and you can find quite easily that your systems are not able to cope with that. So we're having to change the way we deal with the data, which is it is quite important. And the other thing that I've been doing is GIS support. So I do an awful lot of the mapping side of things in Record, and that's from supporting Chloe with bird territory maps or data maps for the estate, for the zoo estate, through to things like production of atlases and support with ELINA and the Forgotten Spaces project. So that's the sort of day-to-day. My keen area of interest, though, is plant goals. So while I've been, whilst I've been beavering away doing the IT side of things, I've also had the opportunity through our our recording work on the zoo estate, plus the odd other events where we've been outdoors. I've been keeping an eye on the plants and the trees to see what I can find in terms of goals. So for those of you who are not aware, these are some of the things I've found this year. And I literally only just started looking at this, so you'll have to bear with me. But these are, apart from the goal on blackthorn there, similis, all of these are new to me. So the gall here on the far left is what they call the cauliflower gall. I haven't used common names on the names here because they're not completely accepted as the common name. They are just names that have started to pick up usage. So yeah, this is cauliflower gall, and it's caused by a mite on the flowers of common ash, so Fraxinus excelsior. Then we've got the mite, Eriophyus similis, which is on blackthorn. It causes these lovely little pouches on the edge of the leaf. Below you've got what I thought, interestingly, looked like a sort of past its best cherry tomato on the left, but it was stuck to the oak leaf, and I thought that's a really interesting thing. So as always, I've got my phone with me, I take a photograph, and then later in the year I actually found a fresh specimen, and this is just around the corner from me, and this is the oak cherry gall, they call it, caused by a wasp. Lovely thing, and it's often found, well, it is found on this sort of second rib up the oak leaf. I don't know why I've never seen it before, because I look at oaks all the time, but for some reason this is the first year I've seen it, so I'm really pleased to see that. And this the fresh one there was seen just around the corner from me, from where I live. So that's another great thing about working from home, is that you can go for a midday walk, which is lovely. So in my lunchtime I'll go for a walk and then come back and I'll work in the afternoon, which is wonderful. It means I get to see far more than I have done over recent years. And then furthest on the right is rather interestingly named the birch big bud, and this is as the name suggests, a big bud on birch. This was found at New Ferry Butterfly Park, so it's a really interesting one. We found that at the one of the days we were there this year. It might have been a Teniptra recording day there. But yeah, fascinating species again, new for me this, so really pleased to see it. And here are the another set, and interestingly, galls are a funny group really. They're actually the definition of a gall, according to AidGap and Redfern and Shirley, if I can, is a gall is an abnormal growth produced by a plant under the influence of another organism. It involves enlargement and or proliferation of the host cells or vascular tissue and provides both protection and nutrition for the gall causer. The fascinating thing is that it can be anything. So I've tried to show that in just some of the things I've seen this year. So from a rust fungus through to a mite, a wasp, a sawfly, and even a moth, which was quite an interesting one for me. So on the far left here, we've got something really interesting called Gymnosporingium, and it's a rust fungus. There are 3, I think, or 4 very similar species, 3 of which I think the 3 of which attack, no, actually 2 of which I think will attack hawthorn. If attacked, will gall hawthorn. And this is obviously one of them. So this is either Clavariforme or confusum. Interestingly, this species will use 2 hosts at different parts of its cycle. So Clavariforme will use juniper, and it's called tongues of fire, and it creates these fruiting bodies that look like little tongues, essentially, as the name suggests, of fire. And it then spores. The spores then jump onto hawthorn and will produce these interesting little spiraceae here. Here. So yeah, fascinating thing. I don't know why I'm pointing, because you can't see where I'm pointing, but yes, here. So if you see my mouth. We've also got an interesting moth causing a gall on willow herb here. So this is one of the Montha micro moth species causing this gall, and here often found at this sort of point on the plant, so between the 2 leaf petioles. And it interestingly will cause the stem to swell, and then obviously burst out, and you've got frass in the middle here. Then we've got ram's horn gall on oak. It's caused by a wasp. Absolutely fascinating looking things. We've also got Buccinia urticata, another rust on stinging nettle. Again, a beautiful thing to keep an eye out for, and really, really obvious. There's nothing else that does this, that creates this sort of deformity, if you will, and bright red and yellow colours on the leaf or on the petiole or on the stem. And I think it can be on any part of the plant, actually. We've also got the Andricus curvatus here, which is the I think it's got the oak pouch gall. And then we've got the willow bean gall. Again, really common species, but yeah, just again, a fascinating thing. And it's one of the common species that you'll see that's caused by a sawfly. So just fascinating. And for the eagle-eyed of you out there, you'll notice that I haven't named the central picture here, and that's for a very good reason. I spent quite a bit of time trying to identify what this was. So I've got the Redfern and Shirley gall key, and I looked through it, and I could find all sorts of different galls for grasses, and in particular this grass, which is cocksfoot, but I couldn't find the gall. So I searched around and around and around until finally I identified what it was, and it is just cocksfoot, which is for me was quite boring, but also really interesting. This is the viviparous form of cocksfoot, I'm reliably informed, and this is the flowerhead. So those of you that are familiar with cocksfoot, which is a very tight packed head and sort of spreads out like as the name suggests, a cocksfoot. This is the viviparous form. I had a gentleman, Dave Earle, confirmed it for me. He's a VC59 county recorder. But fascinating. I was convinced it was a gall. I wouldn't believe it was there. Just a different form, but it is in fact a different form of cocksfoot. And there you go. So that was my year, really. Just as per usual, just fascinating finds by a person still like a young child, bewildered by it all. So we're now going to go for a 5-minute break, but while we're having a 5-minute break, what we're going to do is present you with a festive word search, and we have 7 species names in there, and we've got some clues down the left-hand side here. So the 7 species names that are in there, we've got some clues. The first letter of those 7 names creates a festive thing. So we'll give you 5 minutes now to have a look through, identify them, see whether you can find them in our word search, and we'll come back and give you the answers shortly. Okay. Iona, is there anything else you'd like me to say now? Or are we happy to have a 5-minute?
No, I'm assuming people are already started having their 5-minute break. I don't know, I guess it'll be at 8 o'clock.
Yeah. I suppose people can't go and get a cup of tea whilst they're doing this, but then, you know.
They're on their phones, maybe, multitasking.
Yeah. Or maybe they can just shout to somebody who's in the kitchen to get them a cup of tea. Or a mulled wine, actually, because it is a festive wet session.
We did have a couple of questions in the chat, so I think if we do them when everyone's back, or for the word search answers.
Yes, I did notice. There was a question about our recording days, so that's fine. I do apologise. I didn't offer about questions or mention questions, so we can do some questions afterwards. Yeah, as you say.